It's been a week of early access, and I thought I would just take you through a bit of my journey, my experience playing the game, some of my thoughts, and all those good things. I'm sitting at just under 50 hours playtime, and again, that's not necessarily precise. I'm sure it's closer to 40, but in that time, I've beaten the game twice with two characters. An archer dexterity build, which was certainly my first love. I really wanted to make bow builds work in this game because we saw so little of it in the early demos, and bow builds have some specific challenges that I'm sure we'll get into. My second character, which was a wizard, which again I was really excited about after seeing some of the demos with Blink. And this was the first character I actually cleared all the content, and then I went back to my first character and was able to complete the rest of the content on my first character. But my first character was particularly bad because bow builds have some challenges that until you understand the game, understand the mechanics of things like focus, they're going to be a challenge. And so let's jump in. I'm going to start with my mage just to show you kind of my first successful playthrough, what makes a wizard so great, why it's in many ways a simpler playthrough. Most of the streamers I was watching were doing two-hander run-throughs because of the prevalence of a two-handed unique that drops in the first boss. And anyway, so this is my first character. I was able to clear all the content in the game. Really, I've gone back to Fireball. I was using the lightning skills throughout the playthrough, but in Serum Crucible, Fireball seems to be better, I think you could say. And really, there's nothing to this build. You would kind of build as you would expect. Intelligence and health, putting some in focus and equipment load. I stuck with cloth just because the more I played, the more I appreciated being fast weight class. I really didn't like the feel of rolling as a dodge, and instead just the jumping back, and just it felt so much better to be a fast character. And so I stayed with that. Quite a bit of points in health, quite a bit of points in intelligence for that second staff, but aside from that, pretty straightforward playthrough. Agility rings seem super powerful, so I had a bunch of those in. And then as far as my town, I really focused on, just unlocking tools. So I do have a silver shovel, and that's it. I feel like maybe I can go buy a silver axe now. Wait. Oh, I'm not on my actual realm here. My apologies. Oh my goodness. I was like, where's the wood shop and the enchantment? Because they used to just be stalls. I started this upgrade this morning and I forgot. So they actually have buildings now. Okay, so this is level 3. I did make it to level 3. This is literally my first seeing of. Okay, and here's the wood shop. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure I can buy a silver pickaxe now. Where did all the characters go?
To see what
okay.
I can crop.
Yeah, there we go. So, I would say the grind for unlocking most of the town is actually not that bad. It's quite an enjoyable experience in my from my perspective, playing in the sort of larger scale map. Like, I find that a lot more interesting, engaging. I played some Serum Crucible, as I'm sure a lot of people did, and I have not cleared Serum Crucible yet, just because it would take some time and more grinding. I preferred to make more characters and try to understand the game, and I just found the playthrough of the game really good. Like, man, the story of this game is fantastic. I think people are downplaying how awesome it is, and how I think in a lot of stories, like, they're just so big and epic in scope that they don't feel great. Like, my experience with Last Epoch, like, it's just not engaging because it's too big, it's too massive. And this game is really small, and it's a moment in time, like a very clear moment. Like, we come to this island. There's like you go on just this tiny little quest line, and I hear rumors that this is like not the whole. They haven't released the whole story of the game. So if that's true, then oh my goodness, that really gets me excited, because that's the best part of this game. This game is so fun to level up, to explore the maps, the puzzles, the verticality of it. Just like, I've done it 2 times. I just started my 3rd run. Like, it's just so great. I think it's just so replayable, because you feel like a speedrunner, where you're optimizing things, you're finding these shortcuts and skips that really do make a massive difference in the amount of time. And then, like, once you know what you're doing, you just become so efficient, and it's just a great play experience. And so yeah, I've unlocked level 3 of a bunch of these places. I haven't quite unlocked everything yet, but that's totally fine. I will continue to do so as I level up, and as I, commit to more Serum Crucible runs. With that said, I'll jump over to my Archer, because I want to talk a bit about my first experience in the playthrough. I basically got stuck at sort of these hard checkpoints, if you will. Like, the first boss took me basically 2 days to beat the tutorial boss, and then I got stuck at the boss in the prison, and my character was just garbage, like absolute garbage. I just didn't understand things like enchanting, didn't understand things like infusing, and so when I made my second character, that experience was very different. Something that's really unique about this game is the way that they've developed zones that you have already cleared. They have this sort of living system where zones, you explore a zone, it shows up on the map, and then the more time you spend away the zone, you sort of see this fog of war creep in, and then you can go back and re-explore that zone. That is really neat and cool and awesome. It really is. But it poses some unique challenges that I've never experienced before in an ARPG. Like, all of you know the experience of grinding Diablo 2, where you waypoint to Durance of Hate level 2, you teleport through it, you kill Mephisto, you leave the game, you rejoin, you remake, and you do that exact loop over and over again. Leaving the game does not reset the Fog of War. So you can't just go back to zones that you've grinded over and over again to gain experience and to gain equipment and all of these things. That made my first playthrough really difficult and slow and trudging, because I couldn't figure out how to just like grind. Like, I just wanted to go and grind mobs and kill bosses and get some epic loot, because that's the normal way in which I progress through ARPGs. Like, I'll just I'll reset a zone a couple times in Path of Exile. Like, there's all sorts of great zones in Path of Exile that you just like the Docks is a great example, or Blood Aqueduct, or these zones that you just reset over and over again. You grind, you get some better loot, you get some experience, and then you can sort of glide through these more difficult things like Act 10 Kitava, etc. This game posed a unique challenge in that you can't just reset zones. You can't. So with my second character, what I discovered were people were creating a bunch of realms, which addresses this problem where you can't just reset zones, but what you can do is make 10 realms and then bounce between those realms, grinding the same thing, acquiring a bunch of food, acquiring a bunch of resources, and then, you can just delete those realms and start new ones. I don't know if that play experience is that... It seems kind of like just an extra step to just like leaving the game, rejoining the game. You have to like leave the game, make a realm, join the game, or like have a list of realms, numbered, and then bounce between them. And I mean, that's fine. I would say, is it necessary? Could we just reset the zone? I don't know if just having 10 different realms is that interesting. I only have one zone that I care about. Like, this is my main. This is where I've invested all my resources in doing these upgrades. This is where I put my stuff in the shared stash and then switch with characters to pick a stuff out of the shared stash. And the other zones are just kind of like temporary places for which I farm, and they have no substance. So I would say it's how I solve the problem, which is I can't reset zones. So to farm, I jump between realms. That's my solution. Could we just reset zones? Could we? I understand there's going to be problems with that because there's spots where there's like a bunch of mushrooms that you can just, waypoint to and grab the mushrooms and reset the zone and grab mushrooms and reset. So I think it breaks the design. I don't think that's great, but I also don't really see this making 20 zone realms and then jumping through as particularly great play experience either. So we have a problem. I don't know what the solution is. It made my second playthrough so smooth because things like food didn't become a problem once I had 5 or 6 realms that I could jump below and just collect a bunch of mushrooms and do those kinds of things. Things like resources. Sure, it took some time to grind some of the tier 2 resources like spruce and iron ore and those kinds of things. It took time. Clay is just kind of one of those things that they've increased the drop rate of, etc. And so I haven't really had problems collecting any of those resources, but there's a problem. You can solve it by making a bunch of realms. I don't necessarily think that's I don't know. We need some creative people types to come up with a better solution than just making 10 realms and jumping between them. That basically makes up my first 2 characters. I wanted to talk a bit about bow builds because this is something I'm really passionate about. Like, I just think like Path of Exile wouldn't be Path of Exile without bow builds. One of the big downsides of Diablo is that there's, modern Diablo, you've got the Mosaic Assassin, you've got, Blizzard, you've got Javazon, you've got some builds, but they're kind of gate kept with Enigma, and Hammered In and like. But what made bow builds so difficult to get into was this new resource called Focus. And I know you're all very familiar with this. It's something you build up in combat, and then you can spend focus on your special moves. The problem with bows is you can't use them to build up the focus, basically through the entire campaign. So you can't really play through the campaign with a bow build. What you can do is play a dagger or a one-handed sword or etc. Weapon swap to this bow, shoot it once or twice, use your focus, and then go back to your melee combat. So that's adding a layer of complexity to a very difficult combat system. I love the difficult combat system. This is not a critique of the combat system. The combat is incredible. I love it so much. It's what I dreamed of. Parrying, blocking, dodging. It's so fun. But what it makes bow builds basically a significant hurdle is that you can't build up your focus with the bow. Very different with a mage character. You can build up your focus with your staff just by bopping them, and then you can cast some spells and you feel like a wizard and you're like, this is awesome. Bows, you can't do that. So the way that we're solving this problem in the end game, like getting through the campaign, and perhaps if this is only like Act 1 of the campaign, like maybe there's an Act 2, maybe there's an Act 3, oh my gosh, I would be so excited if that's the case because the campaign's so good, is we solve this problem with gaining focus on... Why are my items... gaining focus on... Well, focus regeneration helps. The big one is a topaz on your pants. You'll gain focus on focus use. So this makes my basic bow attack only cost 5 focus, which is really little. And then you can gain focus on gaining focus on kill. And it's that kind of combination. Now, there is a ring that also gives you focus. I haven't found a single one in 2 playthroughs, so I'm just so desperate to find this ring that all these bow players are talking about. That's basically it. In the endgame bow builds, you can actually start generating more focus than you spend on your bow, and that's really cool, because suddenly we have bow builds in the late game, which I think is maybe a good thing, because playing with this character, which basically is almost net neutral with the focus, depending on how quickly I kill the mobs, it does trivialize most combat in that as I'm shooting my bow, I can interrupt my opponent's attacks, and in doing so, my opponent's not reaching me, roll back, shoot my bow a couple times, and that trivializes what's great about this game. And so I do understand the gatekeeping around range combat. I think it's so great. So this is not a critique of bow play. This is like, warning, bows are not like what we've ever seen in other games. And so you need to approach your bow build with a sense that generating focus is going to be the goal of a bow build. And once you reach the point at which you're generating more focus than you're spending on your basic bow attack, then you really have a bow build. And that's awesome. Once I played through the campaign with my bow build, it was still hard. The bosses are hard, but it's a very different thing being far back shooting. You have more time to respond to the boss's attacks just because of the distance. And so it does become significantly easier when you're fighting at a range. I think it's not what we're used to, but I think it's a great, like, I think these developers are really smart. When I started this game, I dreamed about doing a bow build. That dream was shattered horribly, but as I started to learn the game and started to see what other people are doing with bow builds, I think there's definitely some great bow builds out there. It's just about finding items, finding ways to generate focus on focus use, on hit, on kill is obviously not the best stat, but I think that's what you're going to be looking for if you're interested in creating some kind of build like this. We're a week in. What an incredible game. I've heard some rumors that this is not the entirety of the campaign. Once I finished the campaign, I did stop and wonder, like, it did take me a lot of time, but it's really not that much content. It's, at its heart, it's 3 zones. Those zones are unbelievably complex and massive, but there really is only 3, maybe 4 bosses plus the endgame Serum Crucible boss, so like 5 bosses. If it's true that this is like Act 1 of 2 or Act 1 of 3, man, that's going to make the game really awesome. Because, like, you can beat the game in your teens. And so if you're not beating the game in your teens, but there's still like another, maybe you beat Act 2 at level 20, maybe you beat Act 3 in the mid-20s, and then you grind out the last 5 levels or so in the Serum Crucible, then I think that would be incredible. Because, again, I think the combat is the foundation on which this game is incredible. But on top of that, I think level designs are revolutionary, like, in so many ways. I just really have never encountered a game that does it like this. I mean, yeah, there's some parallels with like Zelda or other role-playing games that are like single player, but to bring that into a multiplayer environment where you can trade, where you can play with your friends, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a week in. I'm grinding my 3rd character. I'm probably going to take one of these characters to max level. I really want to make this bow build S tier, and so I think I will for sure. But I did want to make a 2-handed build just because I know so many people have interacted with the game through two-handed, heavy characters. And for me, that combat is a huge challenge just because I find fast, ranged combat to be such a massive advantage. To be sort of in the midst of combat, sort of high armor, slow attacks, slow dodges. That's something I'm interested in developing as a skill, just so I can kind of hit the ground running with whatever the game decides to drop me in the future. To break a game is kind of the dream of ARPG. Like, the game's so hard, and then you grind for 30 hours, and then the game should be trivialized, right? Like, that is kind of the dream of Path of Exile, Diablo, like having Enigma and hammers and just blinking around and killing everything without really ever feeling threatened. And that certainly exists in this game, even though I think at the start you could never possibly imagine that tutorial boss becomes kind of a joke when you play through it the first time. But it does, and that's kind of what ARPGs are about.